Alrighty, everyone, welcome to my show. I have three guests today. We will be the venue, we as in Raymond, Barrera, and I. We have Daniel Sala. He'll be asking questions from his point of view. They'll be very Daniel-centric pointers at Joseph Powell for like a fourth or fifth time for me. I love him. I think he's the best as far as the SSP experiencers. So, Raymond, you have any introductory things you'd like to say? Or?
Oh, it's a blessing to be here. Blessing in every single way to get this treasure trove of energy, communication here. So it's awesome.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, if you want to introduce yourself and you can take it from here. We're passing the torch to you.
All right. Well, I'm just an avid follower of this whole SSP scene, so I'm not an experiencer, but I've been, convinced of it from day one. So I took this opportunity you gave me to rewatch all of Joseph's stuff because I really rate him. And so I just wrote down the best questions I could to find out more, to not to just have him repeat stuff, because he really led the way to some really interesting topics, and I was dead curious to find out more from the beginning. So this is my chance. And
yeah. Go ahead.
I have a few like lighter ones, and then I'm going to get into like deeper ones with such as the timelines and alters and stuff. So, I start with Joseph, what's your rough estimate for the count of human trafficking that's happening on Earth on a yearly basis?
To be honest, I think like normally, on a planetary basis or just a national basis?
Yeah, planetary, just so people get an idea.
Probably, I don't even know if I could put a number, honestly, man. Like it's
in the millions, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a pretty insane amount of individuals.
I think conservatively 2 million from what I gathered. And what's the proportion of Earth trafficked humans in the major factions that you've seen?
To explain it, we're all pretty much trafficked at some level. So it's like pretty much everybody that's in these different factions are trafficked from here and other locations from, say, other planets that are not only just in our solar system, but outside of our solar system.
Right. And have you actually seen any colonies of people who have broken away and are free of Earth?
I know that there is one on Mars. There's also like the one in Ceres, and there's just a bunch of them. They're just scattered. But ones that I've been at on say with my alter John, which served in Solar Warden, was the Ceres base that what's his name talks about. Tony Rodriguez talks about, right? And then I've seen the one on Mars. I don't know if it was more of a military installation than it was a civilian location.
New Berlin, New Berlin, I'm sure has civilian parts as well, but they still have slaves and stuff.
Yeah. The only one, like the only base that I remember so far on Mars is one that we took over from a different group of extraterrestrials. It was like a hodgepodge of different extraterrestrials, to be honest. But dealing with colonies in general, the only one that I've seen so far is Ceres that I can recall.
And this I've been dying to know. Given that we know that they've been time traveling and getting people back from history as far as hundreds of years ago, are these guys still alive that are hundreds of years back in our history, using regen tech and whatnot?
Yeah, I know that Tony touched on it a little, where like you have civilians that they can use like certain technologies, but they still have to use resources to get it, kind of like what we would have to do if they brought it here. People would still have to pay for it in a sense, and you would have better products, the more you spend versus the less you spend. So I would assume so, yeah.
Cool. And you mentioned that you witnessed solar flash in Solar Warden, and that was kind of what they leveraged to recruit you. And knowing what you know now, do you reckon that was a holographic projection, like some sort of trickery? Was it a real deal event, or was it kind of an averted timeline that you don't really need to worry about now?
It was an averted timeline that we don't really have to worry about, but yeah, it was a real situation. and I felt like people dying. I felt my loved ones dying. I felt them screaming out in agonizing pain before they died. It was like rapid, but I could feel the emotions. I could feel the like just individuals on the planet, even random individuals screaming out and dying in my mind as it happened. So yeah,
Yeah, that's impossible to fake, I would think.
yeah.
And
Plus, on top of that, when I touched the window, because I had put my hand out when I watched it happen, I touched the window that was in front of me, and it was cold to the touch. So
right. Have you? This is kind of entry level, but I'm so curious if you've seen any kind of weapons that were just manifested by gifted super soldiers, so not physical.
yes, two individuals that are public. I'm not going to name them because I already said that I wouldn't do that anymore. But for my own thing. But yeah, I have seen Lixoldaten use their abilities. Yes.
Which I think is level 3 super soldiers, right?
I mean, if you're going off of, I believe, the guy that speaks on behalf of ACIO, is that what you're
Johan
talking
said
about?
that. Johan
Oh,
mentioned that.
Johan.
Yes.
I mean, that could be. I'm not 100% on that.
And you also briefly mentioned that you had to take blood transfusions when in order to acclimatize to other planets, and is that the case for all planets?
I know that when I was a kid at the time, and I was taken to Diego Garcia because I have memories that conjoin with a few others. One that's not public, so I'm not going to name that person. But yeah, and the other individual, which I think his name is Mark Damasio, he was actually there. He had already previously been on that planet, and when we showed up, they did a blood transfusion. He was like missing his arm and everything, and we did a blood transfusion, and then we were sent onto that planet. I don't know what we were doing there specifically. I haven't gotten much of those memories back, just bits and pieces now. But
Yeah, I was really.
I wouldn't say necessarily, because I've been on other planets where I don't recall ever having to have blood transfusions. But I would say for that specific planet, there might have been something there that we had to deal with, maybe like a bacteria or something.
Yeah, that makes sense that it's on a planet-to-planet basis. And I've heard of this 3D to 5D machine from an otherwise extremely credible account. And I don't know if that has maybe something to do with it, because maybe that's how he interpreted it, but actually all it was is blood transfusion. I don't know. But you also mentioned that some about presidents actually, while it's the same bird, two wings of the same bird, and everything like that. Do they actually represent the different space factions, and could that be the actual reason for the desperate tactics during elections?
That could be a high probability, but for the most part, I would say that the people that are in control have always been in control. So it's like you have to take in consideration that both parties are the ones who pick the person that you get to vote on. Therefore,
Right.
if you control the parties, you control who's going to get voted on, and it is what it is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought.
But I would say for sure that there's probably certain factions that probably vie and do whatever they have to do behind closed doors to make stuff happen, for sure.
There has to be, just looking at the last one. But now I want to get into the timeline stuff, if that's okay. Do you know, you mentioned that you're on your 6th and we are on our 5th current timeline, and do you have any idea of the beings that are actually doing the reversing of the timelines? Is it the Guardians? Is it the Time Police or Time Corps or Time Lords? I think the Time Corps is the official name. Or is it the sentient timeline itself that's doing this?
Honestly, I don't know specifically who's doing it. I know like Penny has touched on that quite a bit in certain interviews and stuff, and a few other people. For me, the person who brings my consciousness back in time, or to different timelines, is Commander Ashtar, whoever he is. Specifically, I'm not 100%. I'm just going off of face value for what he stated. But he serves basically the Brotherhood of Light as part of the Ashtar Command.
And if I understand correctly, they're an arm of the Guardians, or the Galactic Authority at any rate.
I don't know. When I was serving with them, I don't have all my memories of it, but most of the time that I served with him specifically, I was on a ship and we were traveling outside of this galaxy into another galaxy, and we were basically helping populations that were dwindling to the point that if they weren't helped, they would basically be exterminated.
And they were all treated like equally. We're not just the only one. Like Earth is not a special, is one of a kind, or you know, privileged in that sense, right?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say that, you know, there's plenty of planets that are just like us. They're surviving the same way that we're surviving. They're slaves just like we are. It's not just specifically Earth in general.
I see.
If that's, does that answer the question you were asking?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And we know that you can either be time looped, like the Germans do, using you know, the reagent and everything, or you can be cloned. But do you have any faint idea of the limits of how many versions of yourself you can have simultaneously? Because there has to be a limit.
You know, I don't know if there can be a limit. I know that I have a lot of alters that have clones that are active even now. I have some that are probably past. I'm not 100% on that yet, but most of my alters, I believe, are still active in clone bodies.
My guess would be something in the hundreds, because knowing that the limit for alters is like 2200, and then not all of them take, like not all of them are mature enough. So that'd be my guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna skip the time, please. So have the previous four failed timelines of humanity been merged into this one to prevent long-term consequences of, or do they still exist elsewhere?
The ones that I've been from are separate from this. But like the time loops that I talked about, they've already come and passed. Like they're not happening now. Like that's already done and over with.
Right.
Like the one we're on has just basically been a loop, but it's the old loops no longer apply, except for people act the same in a certain sense. You know, there's like small differences, and then the situation that occurs can adjust depending on the situation. You know, because when you mess around with time, and you know, certain things like time tends to try to go against whatever you're doing in a sense.
Right. And when do these actual visions of alternate timelines get triggered for you?
So normally what happens is that, you know, I come out publicly like I did, and then I hit a certain point where I meet certain individuals and certain things happen energetically to me. And then once that happens, I see a video of the individual known as Max Spears, and he starts talking in this interview that he's doing outside with the individual that's basically giving the interview. He starts speaking about his black dragon and the gold key, and he starts talking about how he's been here before, and this is like the fourth time, which it's actually the fifth time around when he was talking about it, but he sees it as the fourth time that he's been there. And once he does that, I get really sick, like extremely sick, and I start throwing up, and then I start having these floods of other timelines occur. And then there's just, like I said, there's different energetic situations that occur on top of that. And that's normally around the time that it happens.
And the way in which you interpret them, is it that if the opposite happen, if it is something happens and it's unsuccessful, do the opposite, or did you just wing it?
I've done a little of both. Most of the time I wait until the last minute and basically wing it, because I get most of my abilities and my memories back, so I can use strategic analysis.
Right. Now, on the alter topic, what happens when a Mind Factor Super Soldier or SSP asset gets fully integrated?
Normally what happens is you get their memories back once you integrate them, and they also become a part of you. So there's attributes that they have that you end up taking on yourself.
Right. But I think
And
you mentioned some.
they can still come out. Like if you're not fully integrated, like 100% integrated, like say you have one altar integrated but another one isn't, what happens is that they can still come out, but you remember everything that they do and say. And it also depends on how strong that altar is as well, because you can have weaker altars that only come out when you allow them to, and then you can have ones that are a lot stronger that can come out and do whatever the hell they want for a certain amount of time. From what I've been told, it can be upwards to like a week or two. It just depends.
Cool. And I heard you say something about if you're fully integrated, that allows for a lot more abilities, which and was the point where you actually got to travel these timelines when you integrated, right?
Yeah, normally what happens is like, it's not every time, because like there's been timelines I haven't been fully integrated, but I just don't have as much abilities and memory as I would when I do. So it makes it a lot harder when I'm going up against situations, the situation that ends up occurring. But it's like, yes, once you're fully integrated, the abilities that you get are the same abilities that most of your alters have, because you gain the memories of how they learned how to do those things. So you're basically relearning it yourself, and then some things just can happen automatically.
And given all of this, do you think a case could be made that the long-term purpose of alters is actually to simulate faster evolution in people, which sounds kind of crude, but do you think there's a chance?
I would say that the way the situations go, I'm assuming that there is a certain group out there that willfully is doing it so that it does speed up human evolution, yes.
Yeah, and I
I
know
wouldn't
that.
say if they were malevolent or benevolent, just per se that they know that it would make a certain subspecies a lot stronger than if they waited long term.
Especially because some species like the Draco are actually able to split you without any trauma, like Matt Tracy was. And do you know who the invading ET force was in that first timeline, or was it blurry?
The first timeline that I remember, it was what had happened is they're already here, so there was no like mock invasion in any of the timelines that I was on. I know that they threatened it in some of the timelines, from the same person who spoke publicly about this fake invasion, if that's what you're discussing.
Yeah,
But I don't remember ever going through that specifically. I do have some memories, which I haven't quite been able to delve through, where there was a lot of the super soldiers and they were decked out in like metallic heavy armor, like shock troop armor basically. And I know that it was here on Earth, so that might have been a possibility. But I don't recall it specifically. The individual that the situation that I get put in normally, the individual's already been here, and it's actually a white draconian who's behind the whole situation. He's the one who's been in charge of all these bloodlines on this planet. And he normally sits on the black crystalline throne to begin with. And he basically replaced himself, his spot there, with a clone altar of me to create a situation so he might be able to survive it. With that stated, normally what happens is what's already been happening. I won't really go over it because it won't be able to get posted to YouTube.
sure.
But I went over it in the last video.
And do you think that this white Draco is something that can be also seen in a lot of other planets that are owned by the Draco Empire, or is it just Earth?
I don't know for sure. I don't have any memory of seeing this being other than here on Earth. I don't know specifically. I know that he had me and Casbolt pushing drugs when I was in a different altar clone. And basically we were pushing drugs in Britain and America specifically, and we would go out and do missions that he sent us on. And I think the whole point was to soften the battlefield and make it a lot easier to control the population.
And I know this is gonna sound really insensitive, But do you think that this whole torturing of children to activate psionics for SSPs was, I think you mentioned something along these lines, that it was started only as a necessity for staving off a certain ET invasion?
I think that the original reason behind it was to level the playing field, and they were stumbling into whatever situations they could to do that. And I think that those programs honestly were hijacked by the same people they brought in to train and break us. You know, because it's like they may have had, like, the ends justify the means, I think, was the beginning stages of it. And it was hardcore people that were really extreme patriots that don't really care about the ends as long as it works. And I think it was mainly about keeping the human race alive. But I think that they were played, and people that they brought in basically took over the operations.
So we
Depending
started
on
with,
which faction. Like, if you're talking about Earth, that's basically my point of view. If you're talking about like the Germans, they already knew better, and they were doing what they were doing behind the scenes anyways.
so basically, it doesn't justify the whole torture and slavery thing just because it had justifiable start. Afterwards, after it got hijacked, it became unexcusable, is what you're saying.
That's basically what I would level it out to be. I don't think that kidnapping children and torturing them is right to begin with, but I think that was their point of view to start with.
Right, of course, yeah. And now I have a few questions about telepathy. So I'm
Hold on
sure
one
a lot of
second.
us. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh.
Joseph, you want me to pause it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So telepathy. Do you actually hear it as a voice in your head?
So far, because I've begun the process of getting some telepathic communications. What I've gotten so far, it isn't a voice yet. It's mainly just images or thoughts, and I don't even hear it. I just know it, in a sense, if that makes any sense to that. But yes, I have had situations where I have had telepathic communication when I was younger that I remember, and it was a straight up voice. And it was clear as day, you know, and I know that it wasn't a human voice for sure. But yes, you can have telepathic communication that is vocal, not just imagery or thought.
So basically, it's a blanket term for all these varieties of telepathy, right? So, and do you remember what the range of it was? How far do you have to be from the other person? And does locking eyes make it easier?
I believe, yes, that if you're in range of somebody, you can definitely get them telepathically. But yes, locking eyes makes it a lot easier. You can start sensing their emotions and stuff. But yeah, you can do it pretty much, I think, from anywhere. And I'm pretty sure the more powerful you are in it, you can do it from a different planet at that point.
And how much is it practiced on these Black Ops ships
Quite a bit.
by humans?
I would say by people that are more telepathic than others, yeah. Like when I served with Penny, I used my telepathy quite a bit. I could actually sense most of the crew. That was part of the armada that we had with us and other ships, just that they were surrounding us, and I could sense their thoughts and things. So it's like, it just depends on how strong you are.
So you can have it just emotional based, you can have it just imagery based, and you can have it just verbal, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's full emotional, like full intimacy telepathy, which Penny talks about, which is pretty intense. And
yeah.
That's just a whole nother level of telepathy. But then, like I said, how do I explain this? It's like, you don't have to be around people. I could be on a computer. I could send energy into you from where I'm at, and we're in total different areas, I'd assume. I don't really know where you live. You know what I mean?
Probably, yeah.
And I don't have to know where you live. I don't have to, all I got to do is basically see you. And if you open your mind up to me, it makes it even easier.
Do you have to see me in your mind, or do you have to look at a picture of my eyes or something like that?
If I just have a picture of you, I can just think about you, and I could use energy and mess around in your mind, basically.
And during your travels with the Ashtar Command, have you noticed kind of a difference between a pre and a post telepathic world?
Yeah. There were planets that weren't telepathic. Like some of the people that were in, like pretty much everybody that was on the Ashtar Command, but I don't recall that many planets yet, but I am sure that, yeah, it's just in different groups that I've been in. Say, for instance, sidestepping the Ashtar Command, there was a colony that I went to known as the Greens, which are basically grays that wear only green, just like you have the orange that Johan's talked about, that I've met too. But they have their own civilization, their own little areas, their own homes and stuff. And they just speak to you telepathically. If you know how to speak telepathically, you don't even talk to them. So it's like, it's just simple, it's fast, it's easier. Like, we're having this conversation would have been over probably 15-20 minutes ago.
They can exchange
that.
information, yeah, so much quicker. Sorry to interrupt. I do want to ask. So they have their own community of greens. Does that imply that they are born, these greens, these grays, are born with a bigger and uncalcified pineal gland? Am I correct?
I would assume yes, because they already know about, they understand as a civilization, basically, that telepathy is necessary, and they're basically just born. They're not hindered in that level, from what I've seen.
There's no political control over pumping in fluoride. There's no McDonald's. There's no aluminum deodorant, et cetera, right?
No, like they're not like we are, basically, where we're just walking around in shorter terms, retarded by our leadership.
Of course. So with that lack of oppression, how far are they as far as advancement?
Like extremely. Like, I mean, they don't, like, if you go to one of their little towns that they had, I went to a little town that they had, and it was clean, like extremely clean. The homes were nice that they had. Everything was orderly, I would say. Like, it's a different
homes. Is this like people socializing? Like these grays, is there a male, a female? Is there a third sex? Are they all the same sex? Like, describe the similarities and differences.
There were more feminine ones, and there were more masculine ones. There's photos, I think, that of drawings of people that people have done. But it's like the women, you could tell, looked more like women than the men. If you were looking at it from a human perspective, like they still have certain traits like we do, but there are major differences from us to them. They all had the same skin tone though, so it was like they all were gray. They all were grays, basically.
But they were green.
No, that's what they wore. They call themselves the Green because they wear green uniforms. It's creepy. Okay. And then there was a group known as the Blue, and yeah, it's weird. It's like, imagine an entire colony wearing one color uniformly.
Do they have sexual reproduction?
I don't know. I never got that deep into it.
Maybe if they all look alike, they might have.
I would assume. Hold on. I would assume so, because there are grays that do that here on Earth. So with humans, because they're trying to hybridize. So it's, yeah, I would assume that they do have sexual situations but I don't think that I've never seen them do it physically. I think that they do it genetically.
No, well, good. Okay, I didn't mean to hijack it from Daniel. Last question. If everyone can communicate telepathically, you understand what's their mindset. I'm assuming there's no billboard attorneys advertising. There's no industry for that over there.
I didn't see any advertising.
I'm joking. I'm just saying, like, everywhere you go, it's, like 1-800, were you hurt? Demand so-and-so. And so I'm just saying, if you can telepathically, there's no lying over there. So there's no, like, trial and peers.
There you can block people from going into your mind.
Huh?
So it's not like for instance, if you try to go into a Draco's mind, it'd be a lot harder than it would if a Draco tried to go into a human mind.
But it's
You know?
because it's in relation to pineal gland. Am I correct? Is this the whole kit and caboodle of telepathically communicating?
Yeah, I mean it's your pineal gland. Your I mean it deals with your chakras. Meditation is a pretty big situation that I noticed when I was in the Ashtar Command for sure. They did meditations quite a bit, but you can do a bunch of different things doing that.
Cool. Daniel, thank you. I'm so sorry to sidetrack you.
Of course. All right. So you mentioned the Ashtar command. I remember when they first picked you up, he said that Ashtar said that he heard your hail. And does that imply that anyone can call up to them, or was it more that you were part of their bigger plan?
That's a good question. I know I've been taken quite a bit in every timeline. Always at that point, I get taken. I don't know. The situation that had happened was I think I got triggered when I was playing that Sims video game and saw that UFO, and I just wanted to protect the planet at first, but then again, I also wanted to get the fuck off this planet. You know what I mean? So. Yeah. It's like when you call in somebody to speak to them telepathically, you don't know who the fuck's going to come in. And that's basically the stupid decision I made, So sure. I sat there and just expanded my mind. I shut my eyes and I just tried as hard as I could with my thoughts to call out basically to anybody.
Right. Now we're going to do a 180. If you can elaborate on who the Dark Ones are and if they're in charge of this planet.
Sure. The Dark Ones, from what I can recollect, are just individual beings that are more aligned with the negative polarity than they are with the, say, a lighter polarity, and they are made up of multiple different species. It's just like us. We have evil humans, just like we have good humans. So it's, like I said, it's multiple different species, and they just work in tandem to bring down planets for their control. It's not for no reason, not just we're just going to bring it down to destroy it. They bring it down so they can have control of it.
And I'm guessing they go hand in hand with the white Draco that's on the black crystalline throne.
Yes.
And do you reckon that they are linked to black goo?
Yes.
Almost a dead certainty, right?
I would say so, because anytime I bring up that black crystalline throne, it seems to be a pretty solid situation of it being a form of black goo.
I see. And what's your take on why the white Draco uses your altar as a decoy?
I think it's like a joke to him. It gives him a chance to get an upper hand. There was reasons behind it, because I made a deal for a certain situation to occur coming into this planet. So there's like 3 other individuals that are on the ship that I'm on specifically. There's other ones, but 3 specific. And like I said before in other interviews, we come into this time, into these bodies as humans, and we try to avert what they're doing. In doing so, I started gaining a lot of emotional attachment to one of them specifically, and he played off of that emotional attachment to make a deal with him, and that was part of the deal that I didn't know. Like, it wasn't like he told me what the deal was about. He just said, if you do this, I'll call on that favor later, basically, in a shorter form.
And this was Pindar.
The one that would normally be considered Pindar was the White Draconian, but the altar that was created specifically for him is known as Pindar. His name is Pindar, yes.
And I heard that he was the altar that you blew up planets with using Penny's psionics. And what came first?
So what had happened was this altar is actually a clone, and when I was a kid, right after they broke me and created this altar, I was picked up from my home when I was around, I'd probably say 7 or 8ish, because I was in between 7 or 8ish, give or take. Um, and I was just picked up by this big ship because I've had more memories come back. And this individual is a part of a bloodline. It's a branch of a bloodline known as the Shah House. So he hails from the Shah House. And what they are individuals that generationally, they go out and they have massive resources. They're genetically linked specifically more to a reptilian bloodline than anything else. And through, like basically whoever was there that was in space in House Shaw at that time gained quite a bit of resources, and it goes generationally, and you basically take over that position. So what that individual altar, there was a bunch of us, and there's some that are public that are from Shaw House. I'm not going to name them. And for Pindar himself, he was basically socially and morally abused by these individuals. He was raised with total different morals than say I was. Nothing was off limits, but when you're but the other kids that were there, some of them were more abusive to him than others. So it caused him to be really fucked up. He ended up coming out fucked up because of it. And he learned early on that he was a clone and all the other individuals that were there were clones, because he ended up coming across another individual that I've spoken about because we share a lot of links, but I haven't named that individual. She has an altar that is a part of Shaw House, but she also has another altar that served in Solar Warden, and he met that altar that served in Solar Warden. And that's, he was a lot less negative of a person, but everything that was good was stripped away from him. So he never really had a good upbringing, but it got to a point where he got to meet basically individuals that came from, and basically an ambassador that came from Notchwaffen and an ambassador that came from Solar Warden, because they still need resources to do what they do in space. Like nothing's just given to them. Just because they have slaves doesn't mean that gives them everything, right? So I had 2 ambassadors come to, not me, but that clone had 2 ambassadors come to him. They offered him different things. The one that came from Solar Warden, he basically explicitly wanted to do whatever he wanted. Like he was going to give them resources if he got to serve with them, because he wanted to go out and do his own thing. And Solar Warden would not give him carte blanche to do basically almost whatever he wanted. Also, he liked the black uniforms that Notchwaffen had, and he asked that if he went on a ship and he took over a ship, that he would be allowed to have black uniforms instead of the standard blue with like gold trim and stuff that I remember from John's service. So that was a turnoff for him specifically. And on top of that, they took his black dragon that he had, because when you're a part of this house, normally they give you these baby dragons and you raise them, and they're supposed to be like guardians for you, and they protect you and stuff. He gave his away to this individual that was a clone. And when he did that, Solar Warden got a hold of that dragon and kept it. So he wanted his dragon back, but they wouldn't meet his standards. So he ended up going with Notchwaffen. And what Notchwaffen did is they offered him, because of the resources he accumulated and had, they offered him a position as a captain of the ship that he served with Penny on. And also he was able to basically have free reign of the ship however he saw fit, within a small limited restriction. Like it had to be an extreme situation to restrict him from having anything stop him. And that's why he was able to get away with so much when he was the captain of the ship with Penny. And that's why anytime she tried to complain about him, it never really went anywhere. You know what I mean? So that's that's how Pindar came about. Then there was the situation where after he had served his time and everything, I got to pause. Hold on, my kids. Give me 1 second.
Got it.
Getting back to the Dark Ones, do you think they have a defense against this time action, this merging of times, and putting it back and fixing it, or are they just sitting ducks?
I would say that it's consistent. It's a tug of war. You know what I mean? So it's like the way that I recall it when I was serving on the Ashtar Command is it dealt with the population at large and how many people wanted to be liberated versus how many people didn't. So it's like this planet is kind of offset because you don't know what's happening. So it's like you really can't be liberated from something you don't understand. But what it really relies down to is if you're tired of the planet as a whole being controlled by psychopaths, these individuals will come in and put a stop to it. But it has to be, the population has to be a majority, But if the majority of the population likes what they're living under, likes that structured form of tyranny and sees it as a norm and an okay situation, then they won't interfere.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
So at a certain level, the planet has, like the planetary species, has that free will to decide that. But as a majority, not as each individual. So like you could be like, oh, I don't want to live under that, but if the majority of the planet does, then you're basically screwed. And at this point, there's no way getting off of this planet for the average individual unless you have quite a bit of money.
yeah, I was just wondering, where do we draw the line in the sand where that vote of 50% plus one has to be cast?
That's just not up to us, I would say. Some
Yeah.
things we just don't have a choice in. That just deals with outside forces. But a lot of it is these beings, even though they'll come in and help, they're not going to do all the work. The species that's on the planet has to do it. They'll just render aid, basically.
And you mentioned how Michael Prince actually ended up on the Black Crystalline Throne in one of the timelines. Do you remember how he did it and what came after the event that was so threatening to the world?
So what I recall basically is I brought him with me. And he wasn't really part of the unit specific. I was using him basically to try to appeal to this altar that was there, because it's a mixture, because this altar, even though while he is Pindar took over that clone body. That clone originally was part of the unit that was part of Project Ibis. So there's two different minds within that body, which is kind of a creepy way to put it, but Pindar is the overarching one in control per se, because of the Black Crystalline Throne itself. So when I did that, it played to this individual, but because of what that individual did, because at first he was who he was, and he knew James Caspel, right? Michael Prince. And he knew that woman was his girl, his wife, when they were in that Black Crystalline Throne room. And he basically made him think that it was someone that it wasn't when he did what he did with that individual's wife, that altar.
Pindar did.
Yeah, yes. Well, it wasn't, at that time, it wasn't Pindar that was in control. At that time, that altar was known, I basically have named it 42. He was
Right.
like the 42nd person that was part of, the 42nd kid that was part of Project Ibis. So I just named him 42 so far because I don't know his actual name. But he willingly did what he did. At first, he wanted to sit on that Black Crystalline Throne to change stuff. He was one of the reasons why James Caspel came out and talked about people not wanting to continue to fight the way that they were in his first interview that he did. That person had an integral part in that conversation with him, because he was able to leave the base that the majority of us lived on. So when he sat on that throne, when he was brought in and took that took up that burden of sitting on that throne. He thought that he could change stuff. That's like, you know, if you play with darkness, eventually it's going to consume you. So it backfired on him, and he became more primal as time went on, and he basically became, I would say, a psychopath at that point. But he wouldn't let James Casbolt know that he was who he was. So he was kind of a coward in that sense, right? And eventually Pindar took over because of the way the chair works, and because Pindar is a monster, you know, and fully embraces it. So
And what came out when the veil between the third and fourth weakened after he sat on the throne?
So what had happened is when we got there, James Casbolt saw him. He saw James Casbolt, and he started breaking down emotionally. And when he did, he walked up to him, and they had an interaction. And like I said before, like James basically stabbed him with a blade and killed him. And when he did, when I was off facing this white draconian that shows up right after the situation, depending on how things turn out. I went to go face that white draconian. He walks over and sat on the black crystalline throne. What came out was basically, just imagine almost an infinite march of Third Reich Nazis dressed in black SS uniforms, marching through a portal, a gigantic portal, by the way. And as that was happening, there was also these freaky bat human creatures. So it was like they were basically testing on humans that they took with them, from what I can recall, just from reading their minds, you know. And these individuals were like basically just the most negative humans I've ever felt. So it didn't even feel like they were necessarily human, almost like they were controlled by entities, like just dark entities. When that was happening, they came through. Those bat human creatures came out, would fly around and attack, you know, not just people as we fled, you know, because we ended up fleeing to a certain extent. After that had happened, I was able to, basically the Bright Draconian freaked out when that happened, because that was not what he was expecting. And there was a situation where I was able to sit back on that throne and seal that portal, but they were already through at that point, and there was too many to take on. So we ended up fleeing. Me and like 2 or 3 people ended up fleeing from that location. We failed the mission, and we went to another location, and they basically followed us. On top of that, there was a situation before all that occurred where I tried to hail all the factions into Earth's atmosphere, calling for help to stop what was happening. And when that happened, a big battle ensued between all the factions. The ones that made it to the top of the food chain was Notchwaffen, and they sided with this group that came through because they still have aligning ideologies, right? So after that, I just know that they basically took over the planet and started moving off planets to other planets, and just started this vicious slaughter cycle of insanity. And I just remember dying and being ripped out of taken back to my body, and me and the other 2 individuals, and I was yelled at by this being that we call Mother. And she basically was like, "We're going to have to fix this time situation that you created." It was some weird conversation. This being looks awkward, you know. She looked like a humanoid zebra creature. Like her skin was like this, like her flesh was human, but she had like zebra stripes. She was all white with black stripes, and she had like these almost like a Twi'lek, like 2 long things that came down like a Twi'lek. It was pretty intense. But she basically yelled at us like children. I guess we're her children, and she told us to stay out of what was happening, and that we created a big fucking mess, and that they would have to fix it.
Right. And I noticed that whenever you talk about fellow super soldiers that are big players in your story, they often are people who've been public. And do you think this was kind of on purpose to kind of besmirch this thing, or was it something bigger? What's your take on the reason?
The reason why the individuals that are public are a part of that situation is because I chose them specifically. Because what I do is I evaluate individuals that are going to be in my team.
Right.
Okay. And I evaluate them based off the way that they act. Because most of the time I want people that want to actually free the planet, that do want to see it liberated, that want to see a solar system that's liberated, that want to see the human trafficking of children stopped off planet and on planet specifically.
It totally
And
makes sense.
that's what I picked them for, plus their abilities.
I get it now. And you mentioned that you briefly visited the Akashic Library. Could you describe it quickly, because we're curious?
Oh, yeah.
So like this Akashic Library that I visited, it looked just like a library that you would see, say it was like the Jedi Temple library in Star Wars, but it was more light. Like there was a lot of light that surrounded everything, but there were books instead. And the beings that float around were like spirits, like souls, just balls of liquid. It looked like liquid, but it wasn't, you know. It was balls of energy, basically. Almost looked plasma-like in a sense. But they had sentience and intelligence. Who could speak to you telepathically. The one that I spoke to spoke like very rapidly and was like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? But in like this weird squeaky voice. And as you approach these books, like if you're given permission, because he wasn't expecting me to be there to begin with, as you're given permission you have to get permission to look into these books of memories. I told him that I was only searching for one memory, and it was to ground myself because I was losing myself basically. Once I took that book, it was like taking out almost like a computer drive. It looked like a computer drive in my mind, and then I just saw flashes of memories of what I was specifically looking for. But
Right.
it was just like bookshelves that were stacked like an insanely high amount of feet in the air.
It's safe to assume that it was somewhere upwards of the fourth dimension, right?
I'm not 100%, to be honest. I've never really read up on the Akashic records, so or how that works or whatever. I just know that I was able to bring myself there, and it was it was like my future self / kind of an altar in a sense.
Well, speaking of other selves, do you actually have recall of your original body in the ship within time and space? Because you mentioned that this is not your original body.
Yes, I do have a small amount of recall of it. I have, like when we have like conversations like here on Earth, I have some recall of having conversations with the other two individuals that that I've spoken about. And we've just had conversations because it's like once we go into a body, if we die, we still remember all those things and we have to integrate them. So it's like when you're going into a body with the soul that I have here, like I do have my real soul, but I have basically an altar. So this is an altar that's speaking to you, just like you have an altar. You have an oversoul, and then you have your altar, and your oversoul lives through you, through viewing what you do. So this individual is basically what would be perceived as a Jahami. He's a really tall Nordic being, but he is known as Lucifer. He originally was a warden of the solar system that we live in. And when these dark ones came in, they came in mass and he couldn't fight them off. So he called in Michael Prince, which wrote about it in his book, right? Which is Agent Buried Alive. Okay. And when he talks about him as Michael coming into the solar system, he was brought in by me, and they set up a trap to
just make sure people understand, it's Archangel Michael.
Yes, which is who James Casbolt is. Yes, of course
Yep.
he thinks Michael is a walk-in. The Archangel Michael's a walk-in. If you read his book, he believes that it's a walk-in, and that that's not. It's basically he can come in because of the bloodline situation. I, on the other hand, don't see it that way. I see it an opposite way. That is just his soul, and that's what it is, whether anybody likes it or not. And while yes, energetically it can operate outside of the body doing things, everybody's soul can. Your oversoul isn't in your body. That's why a lot of people can't use a lot of their abilities. But anyways, beyond that, he was called in. He's serving around him. He was an archangel. It's part of the Archangel Corps. Okay, the Archangel Corps, which I believe is what it was called, that he served in. And this individual was an archangel, therefore he was over myself. Like, it's not like how the Bible is. So that shit isn't really necessarily 100%. People can believe what they want, though. You know what I mean? To each their own. But this individual came in. He's very egotistic and full of himself to a certain extent. And he basically felt that he could take them on. I warned him that it was a trap. He didn't care because he just wanted to remove them because they were a threat. It's like you go berserk when you see something that you don't like. That's basically the way he reacted. And I tried to get him to give everybody on the ship an option. And he did, but they all served him, and they served him faithfully. And he earned that, by the way, don't get me wrong. So they went down with the ship, and they basically popped out of stealth mode. They trapped them, destroyed the ship, decimated a lot of them. They fell to the earth, and they became karmically entangled when they died. Whereas I stayed back, watched it happen, because I knew that it was a trap and that we wouldn't win, which in a way could be perceived cowardly, but in a way it was like, what other option would you have? You know what I mean? After that, I started operating covertly, coming here in past lives, basically coming here, being born in different bloodlines. And a lot of it got twisted up because the closer you are to these bloodlines that make deals with, say, reptilians or Jahami for power or whatever, they manipulate the eggs within a womb, giving more genetics of their genetic structure. And then when you have, the other parentage come in, it creates the baby, right? So that's how these bloodlines were formed. And when you come in as a being that has a soul that's intensely powerful, you have to have certain genetics to come into the baby that's born. Plus, I mean, you can come into a baby, you just won't be able to use your abilities. I could be born into a regular human if I wanted to. It's just, if you want to have abilities, you have to have certain genetics added to that being.
Yeah, I think you would be under a lot of duress in a normal human shape. But and I understand that you've been reincarnating on Earth since the very beginning with the express purpose of like liberating the solar system, right?
Yeah, basically, well, my express purpose was specifically to liberate the souls that died that day and free my people, like that angelic group, from this planet karmically by freeing the planet. It goes hand in hand,
Right.
But with that stated, there's also the situation of freeing the planet itself, because that individual doesn't want to see the dark ones keep control of the planet or the solar system, because it's not good. It's not good for business for the individuals that live here, and it's not good for the individuals that live in the solar system.
And now, getting back to maybe the most pressing part of all your the topics that you bring up in interviews is a more current event type of thing. Is back to Nachtwaffen. So you come back with the 20-ship armada. How did you initially find out that Earth was still inhabited, given that you're usually told that it was bombed, and people think it's no longer inhabited?
Sure. So what had happened is like that altar already knew that it was in existence, but he didn't really think too much about it. When he was dragged in front of that council that he got taken in front of, and they were going to end his life, they basically stabbed his honor. Like, he still has honor, it's just a warped version. So he still believes in protecting humans, just his form of protecting them. Of course, the chair has played a major part in corrupting him mentally, so he's basically nuts, but even more than he was before. So it's like that individual, he basically was called out. And when he said that to them, the only person that came to speak on his behalf that actually gave a fuck about him was Commander Ashtar, which is the reason why he survived, from my point of view. And it wasn't just Pindar either at that point. I had multiple alters, because once you get put in a situation like that and you get scared, you start having multiple alters come out, because that was an intense situation where basically they were going to destroy my complete soul, so you'll do whatever at that point. And I went through altar after altar after altar. Even I was there to a certain level, and after that situation happened, I got punished by being in that location that I was placed in. Once I came out of that and they brought me back, that individual's perspective changed drastically. And he was like, I'm going to go free the planet. So he didn't say, oh, we're going to free Earth. He came back, he ordered Penny to take all the ships, but the main destroyer ship that was within the vicinity, and to take us through the fourth dimension all the way to the coordinates that he gave her, which was where Earth was located. After that, everybody saw Earth that was in that armada.
Was there
So,
a specific? Sorry. Was there
Go
a
ahead.
specifically threatening event that was going on Earth at the time, or what prompted you to come here? Was it just the fact that it was such a factory for souls?
The point of why he showed up was to liberate Earth, because he stated that he wanted to protect humans. And when the council called him on that and said, well, like, he didn't say Earth specifically, he just said humans. They said, well, if you want to protect humans, then why do you continue to allow Earth, which is the main location where you're from, where humans are from, to be victimized and enslaved? When they said that, he lost his shit because he got called out. So from that perspective, he came to liberate the planet and to stop slavery from taking place for the humans that were there. That was why he was there. There was no specific threat in general. It's just, we're under the threat of slavery as it is. And when he showed up, he was going to wipe out, his plan was to wipe out all governing structures, to remove basically anybody that was going to touch humans from the planet, and by any means necessary. And there was plans where basically, if there was a Hail Mary situation, it was to use an atomic bomb to misdirect the enemy, so that he could come in and wipe out the remaining threat while they were basically faced with a nuclear situation. That would be a last resort. Why he was doing that, the destroyer ship shows up that was part of the armada originally, because they tracked us, and they started telling us to stand down. But he basically told everybody, this is Earth, I want to free Earth, and anybody that wants to help, basically step forward, in a sense, in easier terms. And there were ships that turned against other ships, the ones that had Draco on them, that were being led by Draconians, Warrior Draco. Some did try to rebel, they got killed, but for the most part, the Draconians that were in charge of the other ships, like all the Draconian ships, they kept their ships, and anybody that dissented on their ship got killed in that situation. Other ships that didn't have weapons, most of them that we were saving from colonists, turned against those ships, because we were in a situation where we had to basically we would have had to fight off that armada. Most of the ships that had guns and weapons were in control by Notchwaffen, people that still supported Nachtwaffen and didn't want to do anything against orders. And that's why I stood down. And it took a minute too, because he was still trying to analyze the situation. And in the process of that, one of the individuals that was on one of the ships freaked out, set codes, dropped a nuclear bomb. That time was averted. That timeline was averted, so that got stopped. And then we got taken and we got basically tortured. After we were commandeered, and I went over that in
Yeah.
Penny's interview. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that Johan actually prevented your death. And do you remember anything else about that? Like, what was his rank?
I just know that he was there torturing us. He didn't really prevent my death per se. We were just being tortured for information. They wanted to know why the fuck we were there, what the fuck we were doing, and who the fuck was leading the situation, because they didn't understand what was going on. Okay. So it's like they were just shocked. Like most of them were in shock and were like trying to figure out why I did what I did. And they didn't know it was me yet or not. They didn't know who I was working for, if I was working for somebody or what, so that's why they were torturing us. There was an escape that happened. Penny and a bunch of the other officers left. I stayed behind.
Yeah.
And hold on one second. Damn it.
And I know this is a somewhat touchy issue for a lot of people in the community, but are you here, Joseph?
Yes.
Okay. From your recall, is the Alliance actually independent of Nachtwaffen and made up of defectors from Nachtwaffen?
I recall that there probably is a small sliver that is operating, but at this point you got to take in consideration that they've probably completely defected to a certain extent, because the fact that people are talking about it publicly already breaks up any secrecy that would take place. Because these factions do pay attention to what a lot of people that are coming out publicly are saying. So
it's just difficult to make sense of how, given that there are at least 1 trillion Germans and they've had this much time to advance their tech, even to the point where, because they're so far away from Earth in the Sagittarius arm, now they even have more advanced souls. So all this stuff put together makes it really tough to believe that they're so threatened by the ICC. But yeah.
Well, I never said that they were threatened by the ICC.
Oh, yeah, it's true. But you did say that this whole thing would unfold at the end with a war between Nachtwaffen and ICC, right?
Yes, there are. What is happening is a lot of, they're fighting the Guardians. So a lot of Guardians, basically the Guardians who have more advanced ships and more advanced individuals on them, are slaughtering basically colonies that don't submit and basically leave the fucking planets they're on outside of the solar system. And they're forcing them to come back. So most of them have opted to come back. And what is happening is you have ICC, which is interplanetary corporate conglomerate of massive group of individuals that aren't really good necessarily at all, shooting ships that are coming through that are just civilian ships. And they think that they're fighting some great war against the Nazis, basically. And that's the truth. That's what they're doing. And they are attacking people in this solar system. They are attacking Nachtwaffen in the solar system. That battle will be going hot eventually. I remember that in other timelines when I was in the solar system fighting. You have to understand that I don't really have very much resources. So the way I build my resources is to go to battlefields that happen between both of these factions, and their ships get left behind when they leave. So what I would do is I would swoop in with what little ships that I had and take their ships, commandeer them, try to fix them, and use them to build an armada. Eventually, there comes a situation where I get attacked, because they're like, you're touching our property, and I'm like, fuck you. And we go into a battle. Normally I survive because I'm actually pretty good at what I do. And we commandeer that ship and all the people that are on that ship. Normally I don't take prisoners. There's nowhere to put them. So they get an option to surrender to begin with. But if they continue on, I basically slaughter everybody. Unless you turn against your crew members. And then normally I'll take them in.
But before they actually went against each other, ICC and Nachwaffen, they actually managed to repel the Draco forces. Am I correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
Where did you get that from?
I thought in the Penny interview, the fourth one, I thought you mentioned that you staved off the Draco invasion, and after they united for that, they went against each other, and pretty
Yes.
much.
Okay. So basically, what it is ICC and Nachwaffen are actually fighting, and Nachwaffen called in basically the Draco to come back them up. So the Draco are on their way, and when I get to that point, I head them off, and I'm not a part of the ICC. I'm not a part of any faction at that point. Basically, I perceive all factions as the enemy, which they are, because they're kidnapping kids and slaves and all sorts of shit. So what happens is I head them off. I remembered from other timelines, the first time I got to them, they caught us, and I learned when they come in where they were located, and I used that in a different timeline. But they basically slaughtered us the first time that I met them, because they come in with a lot of ships. In another timeline, I remembered that. I located where they were going to basically come through at. I met them when they showed up into our solar system and told them to turn around and stay out of human business. And they basically told me in smaller terms to go fuck myself. And with that, I was able to use certain things to destroy them.
And after ICC and Nachwaffen kind of cancel each other out, can you say something about what happens to the remaining factions around Earth?
So normally what happens is I go around, I attack different factions, I get as strong as I can, I make deals with other planets that we liberate from being enslaved, and I become a multi-military space force, in a sense. Just not space force. I don't remember the name. I never really gave it a name because we were just busy fighting. But what I did is we took out ICC. They fell first, and then I proceeded to destroy Nachwaffen while they were still bringing these colonies in from outside of the galaxy. And anytime they come in, I basically let them know that they're going to surrender and that no harm would come to them as long as they don't fight me. Any faction that surrenders, I don't attack. Right? So what happens is I basically wipe most of Nachwaffen's military in the solar system out. It's not easy. Some of the colonies still want to support them and want to support slavery, and I destroy some of those colonies. I recall about 2 colonies in this solar system that do not wish to live peacefully without Nachwaffen being in control as their military, their space military, and they still wanted to keep slavery, so I destroyed their colony basically as a whole. I just decimated it. There's 2 of them, and it's a sad situation. But once they decide to broker peace, we create a treaty. And here on Earth, there is a human council that nobody that's public is a part of. They're individuals that are picked by the individuals that live here on Earth from the surviving groups. And when they do, they come together. There's a certain amount of them. The person that represents basically the German colonies as a whole, there's somebody that comes that represents them as a whole. And they get to sit on that council as well. The first person they pick is a conniving piece of shit and tries to do the same bullshit and bring back their Nachwaffen space military. And I find out he tried to betray me. I killed him. The next timeline I was in, I executed him when they brought him forward and told him to pick another person. So
All right.
that's pretty much what
You
happens
froze
on
up.
that end.
Joseph?
Can you still hear me? Hold on.
Yes, now I can.
Okay.
And
Anyways,
go ahead.
I don't know if you caught that last part, but
No, not the last sentence.
so yeah, so like I said, there is an individual that they put forward. The first timeline that happened, that they did that, he ends up betraying me later. So I ended up killing him in that timeline. But in the next timeline I was in, I knew who he was. I knew what he was going to do. So I executed him and basically had the remaining German colonies pick a new person to represent them. So there's going to be one person that will represent all the German colonies within this solar system, and he will be sitting on this human council that normally resides on Earth. Once all that takes place, in the process of all that, I'm still going around decimating all these other remaining factions. So they no longer will basically be able to operate in this solar system as a whole. Once everything was said and done, after everything's done, I normally come back here to this planet, and then I basically have that council set up a trial for all the stuff that I've committed, all the crimes I've committed, and other clones and things like that, and then I have them execute me.
And all these events that you've just been talking about for the last 5 minutes, are these part of the current timeline, or what? Do you project that this, what's the biggest indication for you that this timeline will have all this decimation of these factions?
That just depends. It depends on how successful I am. You know,
Right.
It depends on how successful I am. It also depends on how things turn out. You know what I mean? If I fail in the initial battle, that shit isn't going to take place. If I'm successful, then different situations occur where normally, like I talked in the last interview, where I go around, I hunt down the human individuals that are in the know, that were working for these alien groups, such as the Jahami or the reptilians, and basically doing their bidding for all the humans that are here on Earth that kidnap these kids and put them in these programs and stuff. Most of them are hiding in their own individual underground bases, underground locations, and then there are some that are wealthy enough to have their own base with other super soldiers with them, but the majority don't. They're just individuals with either themselves or their spouses and children if they have them. And normally what I do is I go around and I start killing them one by one and forcing them to omit their crimes publicly, and I make sure that it is a public situation that occurs. When that happens, the planet at large doesn't necessarily take it as a very good thing, especially when you're portraying that publicly for everybody to see. You know, a lot of people still believe that they should be brought in before a court and have their day in court, and, you know, the old way of how things work. And it also is a contentious situation even within our own community, that most people don't think that should be the right direction for things to happen either. But I also understand that if you leave these people alive, they will come back and they will make sure that shit goes back to the way it was, and that there is no extra chance of that happening.
You said that you filmed an event that managed to convince a lot of people about all of these threats going on. Do you remember what the event was?
Yeah, so when that battle takes place, normally what I do is I take somebody that's prominent within the more patriot community, and I use him as well as the people that he normally has with him that, you know, go out and film him. And when that occurs, what happens is I make sure that the individuals that are helping me portray that to the entire planet. So no channel will have anything but that situation playing out. So everybody gets to watch the battle happen in real time. Most people think it's CGI at first. until after the battles are completed, like the missions that happen in those different battles. After that is done and successful, if it is, then what happens is the recordings start happening where that individual no longer is there, and neither is his camera crew. It's just me going around with a small handful of a small unit, after certain situations happen, executing those individuals that I'm talking about and making sure that everybody has to see it on the planet. And necessarily they don't have to, by the way, but I just perceive that as the wake-up call for people to realize that shit's really gotten bad.
So from what you've said so far, I can kind of surmise that there's not going to be a timeline that's not bloody and with just amnesty to these elites that will just give us all the tech that we want and just kind of a happy compromise for all, right?
I've never seen that in any timeline I've ever been in.
I see, yeah. And given how you said that people were unappreciative in the post-disclosure world about the technology, and they just want more and more and more, how do you think you should, pace the influx of the technology? Should it be a stream or should it be just open floodgates?
So when I was in control at that point, the situation that I did, I just gave everybody what they wanted, and that didn't turn out well. If you just give people what they want, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fix the problem. So normally that's why I'm normally not in charge. I leave the planet with a humanoid council, which is what most of the groups in space have anyways, that have lasted quite a while. I leave it to that human council to decide what they choose to do. And then there's also individuals I spoke about in another interview. I'm not going to go over it again. And I already said I wouldn't do that. So what takes place is I don't even know, because I'm no longer on Earth. I just know that people have a better living situation, and people are treated with a lot more respect, and there's a lot less of the shit that's happening now, like to an extreme. But there still is crime. There's still everyday average criminals. There's still people that murder people and do stupid shit like that, because that happens everywhere in every civilization to a certain extent, unless you're a hive mind collective.
You said you've experienced maybe the second scariest thing that you can as a soul in this galaxy, which is, I guess the first would be your destruction as entirely as a soul, and the second would be being punished in those, I don't know how many thousands of years old, looking at scenery that's horrific. Can you describe some of that scenery?
So the scenery was actually not horrific. It's just you're stuck there permanently looking at it and you can't move. So it's like, it's a beautiful scenery, but after you've seen it, I don't know, for a couple days, you tend to be like, what the fuck, especially if you can't put yourself to sleep. The way you get around it is to cause yourself to go to sleep, but you normally can't do that unless you say, almost do something similar to a regression on yourself. You have to talk in a monotone voice until you can put yourself to sleep. Once you do that, it's like it's 3 days, if that, it feels like that. But if you don't, you're looking at an infinite amount of time until they show up. And what happens is you see the scenery, you've seen it for enough time, you're going to start going in your own mind and looking inwards to yourself. And that's when you start going crazy and you suffer through all the shit you've done.
And I guess there was no actual avoiding the third of those sessions that you had, because you tried to cheat them the first 2 times. I guess they always will know, and they always will see your punishment through, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, he probably would have let me go had I not been a smart ass about the situation. He probably would have let me go after the second time had I not sat there and mouthed off. It was because I acted like a jackass that he was like, oh, really? Well, now you're going to be here permanently then. Should I leave you here permanently? And when he said that, that's when I just lost my shit, because I didn't see it as a little bit of time, a long period of time going by, but to me, it would have been a little bit of time technically, but an infinite amount of time. You don't want to be in a place like that. It'd be like if somebody said they were going to put you in prison tomorrow and all you were ever going to see is the prison bars.
So if you had to like write a novel or something about that event, you couldn't do it because it was so completely uneventful, that it was just forgettable, right? You just wiped it clean, right, or something.
Yeah, it's basically you just go crazy. You
But
go
it's
insane.
education. But it's education
Yeah.
for the soul, right?
Yeah, you look inwards, and then you start focusing on yourself. You judge yourself basically in that situation. You start going through your mind going, well, why did I do this? If I only would have done this, if I only would have done that, if I only would have done this, but it's for a long portion of time. Yes,
Right.
it's personal punishment on reflection of your actions.
But I guess they have to be careful as well because there is the threat of you going mad, right? Otherwise they were doing indefinitely and everyone would just mainline on it because they know they would benefit from it.
I can't recall what they did after I was out. I'm assuming that they probably had to heal my mind to a certain extent, but it was a living lesson not to be stupid and do what I was doing anymore. And that individual, which is Pindar, didn't. He hasn't gone around blowing planets up and doing stupid shit. You know what I mean? That was basically put to a stop. I mean, he went against Notchwaffen right off the bat. Didn't give a fuck. I mean, like I said, he dealt with that other officer that was on his ship at the time when they were wargaming trying to save that colony, and he basically told him to go fuck himself. Which is a no-no.
Right. And you mentioned about a possible mass activation of super soldiers. Is that kind of an indispensable part of repelling all these forces, or can we actually do without? And is it doable at all?
Can you? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Mass, yeah, like when mass activation on a global scale of super soldiers. Do you think that we can actually avert all these negative timelines without it, or is it indispensable?
I think that it's an indispensable situation. Like, it has to happen.
Right. Makes sense.
And it's not necessarily like you don't necessarily get a choice, man. It's like we have alters that defend themselves. So when you start seeing these beings come in back into your life, like in real time, stepping off of ships and doing shit like that, or just mass genocide like that, those alters activate whether you like it or not, for self-preservation.
Right. And I guess the slower way of doing that is integrating. And do you have any advice to mind fracture super soldiers who are to integrate on Earth?
I mean, like I said, I think the best way that I've seen so far, and that I recall from other timelines, is shamanic soul shard gathering. That is one of the best ways that I've seen. But you can try to do, past life regressions, depending on who you're dealing with. But you really just have to be mindful of who you're working with, because people can mess your mind up. People can alter things that shouldn't be altered. Like, you're not supposed to change your memories. You're supposed to embrace that they happened, accept that they happened, and try to heal from them. So that's the major fact of it. You don't necessarily have to be happy about what happened, but just the fact that it did exist, it did happen. You couldn't change what happened. You just have to basically accept the situation. And that's normally how integration works. But there is, like I said, a spiritual level to it, just not in the way of like religion, but it's just, that is a soul shard. It is a soul. It is spirit. It is a fracture of your soul. So when you go to do that integration, I remember seeing it as like I kind of explained, with like a corporeal soul kind of situation. And I was in this landscape, almost like astral projecting, but not really. And you touch it like you touch someone's mind. And when you do, it sends images, memories, and feelings and emotions and pain, everything, which is normally with the traumatic situation where it was broken and created.
And in the successful timeline or timelines, how much of the success was owed to people who were hybridized with ET, and how much was to unaltered humans? How big of a role?
I would say that the hybridized, altered humans play a bigger role in the initial liberation. but I think that everybody has a role to play, even the regular humans, for sure. And I think that from my point of view, regular humans should be treated with a lot more higher regard than even ourselves, because they're at a major disadvantage, even worse than we are. You know, but yes, everybody plays a role at some level. You know what I mean? But for the most part, from what I recollect, it was a lot of people that are SSP that helped liberate the planet, free us, and basically keep us free.
And also in these timelines, I'm guessing that disclosure played a huge role. And what would you say is the best and fastest way to attain disclosure?
I would say the route that I went, because it was in there, and it's in your face, it's bloody and it's real, and you can't just look at it and say that's fake. You know, you
Right.
can't fake people begging for their lives, even though they've committed such atrocities, and then watching somebody repetitively kill multiple random people, and your governments can't stop it.
Yeah.
When you cry out to them and beg them for help, and then when you come for their government leadership and execute them, you know, it becomes a real life situation. In a sense, yes, the fake alien invasion probably would have done something. It wouldn't have done anything good, from what Penny remembers. You know what I mean? That's a very stupid idea. I don't know why our people in positions of leadership in our government are pretty stupid from my point of view, but they're naive. You know what I mean? As a species, we're a pretty naive species, but it is what it is, you know? But that is normally the fastest way. And then, you know, I stay out of how the technology gets distributed and all that stuff. I normally don't go into that other than in that one timeline. So I don't know how long it takes for you guys, for humans in general, to get that tech. Normally, I try to make sure that people that are like me are able to get that tech so that they can have a life of their own at that point, you know, so they can become younger again if they choose. They're not forced to, so that they have time, if they weren't fully integrated, to fully integrate and get to live a life without being hunted, abused, tortured, and, you know, continually abducted and raped and fucked with.
Right. You pretty much answered all my questions. So a lot of new info. So that was really cool. I hope it's okay for you too.
And there are also situations where, you know, I was asked, I haven't been asked this yet, but in one interview I was asked, what if somebody wants to be 12 again? And I was like, personally, I wouldn't go with that outright, but, you know, if people later on want to do that, that's their own business. If they have the money to support themselves or whatever. But from my point of view, I think that people that were in the SSP should be put back to at least their prime age if they choose. They don't have to, but if they choose to, so that they can heal. But like I stated in the interview that hasn't happened and I haven't been asked, is that I think that that is not something I would agree with, but that wouldn't be up to me at that point, you know?
And kind of a minor question that kind of a reject, but I'm kind of curious. Do you think that this Brotherhood of Light, which might not be part of the Guardians, does every planet, would you guess that every planet eventually has to go through this choice of whether they're part of the Dark Ones or Brotherhood of Light?
I'm sorry, repeat that last part. Everyone?
Do you think that other planets eventually have to go through the same process of choosing?
Oh yeah, for
between,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was on the ship with Commander Ashtar, they had vids, and that's what they would play on the vids. You know, we were able to watch like black and white movies that wouldn't affect the here and now, so we didn't know what was going on Earth in the here and now, because there was a small contingency of humans that were there that served there, and they wanted to make sure that we didn't know too much about what was happening in the time frame we were in. So they allowed us to watch black and white movies that were before our time. And while they were doing that, you could switch to like a vid of, oh, this planet, this random inhabited planet chose the light over the dark. You know, chose the light, the light ones, the Brotherhood of Light over the, say, over the dark ones. And this is the percentage, or this is the planet that fell to the dark ones, and this is the percentage that joined them. That kind of a situation.
I see. And you were taken as a one-time deal and returned when you did the 90-year trip with the Afsar Command, right? Returning to the
Yes.
same place. Right.
Yes.
I figured.
Sadly, yeah.
Yeah, because you still want to be there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was treated with respect. It's almost like when you meet your higher self, how much love that higher self has for you is more than you could ever even imagine. It's a stronger love than you being a father to your own children. That's how much your higher self loves you. And they were almost on par with that, I would say, with the respect and loving and kindness and patience they had with me. They had a lot of patience, a lot of patience.
Well, that was my run of questions anyway. So I better not hold you too much longer. I guess Zan decided to, I don't know, hit the road, but I can cut anything out because he told me we have control of it. Oh, there he is.
No, you have complete control, fellas. Also, too, Raymond, is there things that you wanted to ask either one of the fellows while we got them?
Not really ask, just a commentary that a lot of this, the name of the game has to do with evolution. That was pointed out earlier, and I think that's very, very spot on. You know, about the human condition or the being of living, and or whenever awareness shines through, like a sun or like light. Just whenever there's any form of awareness that's a form to push through what, even if one is a homunculus or whatever. So at the start of the sinoatrial node, the starting point of the heartbeat, as it would be poetically considered like a mustard seed of light, whatever. So at this point, the heartbeat, though, this awareness that shoves through and goes through luminously, like a 0 point of energy, can reside and permeate through everything. You know, a good book, if I may mention real quick, is My Escape by Nicole Flemming, a good friend of mine. And she portrays the human condition and the hero's journey of pushing through trauma and getting to the core and spirituality, the very depth of it. You know, so I must say, the name of the game is evolution. I appreciate everyone here, and our souls are one, and maybe persevere through this.
Thank you so much. Well said. Joseph, we've had creative control the whole time. I don't know if there's anything you want to usher in conclusion.
I mean, the only thing that I'm going to continue to say is that people that are like me, they need to do their best to try to integrate. I know that that's kind of a long-winded lost cause for the majority of them, but there are a very large handful of people that are trying to do that. Just do what I said. Do your integration work. You know, you're either going to be a player, a pawn, or a victim for what's coming. And it is coming. It is real. And I don't care what anybody says because I've lived it more than once. So people just need to understand that and get with that and realize that. And if you truly do want to see change, that is the only way that it's going to happen. You know, I wish that we could just sit and sing Kumbaya and things just change doing that. And I wish that we could just fight off our government, on the battlefield and just end it. But that's not what's going to fix and end things. While yes, the guardians themselves of the council do offer us the opportunity to become a very advanced technological species, that's not just going to happen, rapidly. We have to change as a society before that even gets offered. I know that eventually it probably will. In any of the timelines I've been in, I haven't seen it offered, but I know that it is a real thing, that it does get offered for sure. And I hope that whatever part I play in this and whatever part everybody plays in this, because I'm not here doing this myself. There are multiple individuals that are a part of this. I'm not special on any level. It takes all of us to fix this problem. And I hope that we can at least fix it. I wish that the way that I talk about it didn't have to occur, but from what I've seen, it works. And though it's violent and bloody, it gives us an opportunity. And like I said, I normally come back for my trial. I would never stand here and state that I can execute these people without being willing to come forward to be executed for the things I've done. So I don't agree with all people that were in the SSP being executed. I'd never promote that. I believe that they should be given clemency. I just don't offer clemency for myself. And normally when I hunt down my clones, I give them no clemency either. So that's pretty much it. You know, it is what it is.
It's for the greater good, which I admire you. That was a wonderful depiction of this trichotomy, if you will, that's going down. And me, with my lack of knowledge and pursuit, reaching out to people like you, Daniel, and Raymond, I can definitely say with confidence that this future from the surface level looking up cannot continue. I mean, we have forces that are drunk off power, and the quickening is here. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for their participation, and I want to thank everyone who is watching, and we'll post this momentarily. Thank you.